To anyone who was a fan of Godzilla and other kaiju properties in the mid-80s through the 90s, do you recall the frustration of not having a definitive Godzilla-themed 2D fighting game? Yeah, back in the day, at least in the West, there weren't many options. I mean, there was no shortage of Godzilla games in general, even back then, and regardless of the quality of the games themselves, they were options. There was a side-scrolling action game, a strategy game, a puzzle game, whatever the hell this is. There were plenty of Godzilla games, but as for a straightforward tournament fighter for a major 4th generation game console, it never really happened stateside. The closest anyone got was maybe Battle Legends for the Turbo Duo, but who the hell actually owned one of those? There was Godzilla Kaijuu Daikessen for the Super Famicom, you know, the Japanese SNES that actually looks kinda cool instead of looking like a Minecraft villager. Still, as I said, that was a Japan-only release. Aside from that, I can't think of anything regarding a Godzilla tournament fighter released for a popular console, and it's only available to many of us now thanks to the internet. But what if I told you that this is not the only 2D Godzilla fighting experience, and that there is another option that, rather than just being made more accessible by the fans in conjunction with the internet, was instead made of the internet and totally fan-made, with no official endorsement by Toho whatsoever? That I know of. That, of course, is Godzilla Daikaiju Battle Royale. Not to be confused with another fan-made project that has a very similar title. No. That was Godzilla Battle Royale. This is Godzilla Daikaiju Battle Royale. Daikaiju, loosely translated, just means giant monster. You know, just FYI. Godzilla Daikaiju Battle Royale is a very important game to me personally as a G fan, and that's most of what I'll get into here since there isn't a whole lot of background info on this thing. All I can tell you as of now is that it's a fan game created by Alex Murdoch. Is that how you pronounce that? Whatever, I don't care. At some point in the last 10 to 15 years, since that's when I remember it popping up, so I guess it must have been when it was created, apparently. But as for my personal history, I have a lot of fond memories of playing this game. It was really cool as a little kid to have a Godzilla game that I could play whenever I wanted, even if it was unofficial, especially since a lot of the games I showed earlier I didn't and still to this day don't have in my possession. But does this game really hold up after all these years? Or was it just the novelty to it that drew me in so much? Well, let's take a look. Without any further ado, let's stomp our way into Godzilla Daikaiju Battle Royale. Nah, that's no good. God, I wish I could come up with a better way to introduce this. So without any further ado, let's stomp our way into Godzilla Daikaiju Battle Royale. Much better. Let's get one thing immediately out of the way. Cheat codes are absolutely mandatory. Everyone who's played this game knows this. Anyone who has knows that before you do anything, to input the code 1131954 to unlock all the monsters. Also, yes, 1131954, as in 11/3/1954. Any hardcore G fans who know what that represents, feel free to fill in the newbies in the comments. I got a review to do. So to start off, we've got several different options right here. You have arcade mode, which is just the story mode, standard player versus player and player versus computer mode, and here's an interesting one, computer versus computer mode. Yeah, just in case you want to watch the computer opponents duke it out instead of playing it yourself. We'll get to all these modes later, but for now, let's just start with the arcade mode. Since I put the code in, I can play as just about any monster I want. I don't know if the story changes based on what monster I pick, like what happens if I choose a bad monster like Ghidorah versus what happens if I choose a good monster like Mothra. I don't really feel like finding out since I'm just gonna be Godzilla, but, you know, yeah, I gotta pick my incarnation first. This is one of the cool things about this game. Many of the monsters have their own set of incarnations if they appeared enough times and had drastic enough design differences to warrant it. They don't squeeze every version in here, and they certainly aren't to scale, but it's nevertheless a cool addition. I also like how, for some characters, they might include not only different incarnations, but even different redesigns representing a single incarnation. Like in Godzilla's case, we have Godzilla 1962, 1964, and 1973 all depicting the Showa Godzilla, but since that version of the character had so many different designs over his tenure, they had to fit in as many as reasonable. I like that attention to detail. They did the same thing for Rodan. It's not just Showa Rodan, but instead Rodan 1956, 1964, and 1965. Sure, 1965 looks a little derpy in comparison to the others, but so did the film version, so I think that's more on Toho than anyone else. But since we are playing the arcade mode first, I guess I better get into it. It's pretty straightforward, as to be expected. It involves the Exilians coming down to Earth and pitting all their monsters against one singular defender on Earthside. Pretty standard stuff, and a pretty Final Wars-esque setup with Godzilla just being this lone badass squaring up against all these different monsters. It also kind of reminds me of Godzilla Monster of Monsters on the NES, so just take that game and splash it with some Final Wars, and you get Godzilla Daikaiju Battle Royale arcade mode. All the fights are totally randomized, so even if you play through this multiple times, it's unlikely you'll get the same or similar gauntlet every time. It doesn't matter since most of the monsters act pretty much the same, but that's besides the point for now, and the whole thing climaxes with the defeat of a final boss monster. In this case, it was Destroya, but it could also be King Ghidorah or any of the other notorious big bad monsters in the series. All in all, the arcade mode took me about 10 minutes to beat, and I doubt it'll take you much longer. So, the arcade mode is a very simple, very short little series of fights that I guess you could just play over and over again until you unlocked all the monsters, and the randomization of the opponents most certainly helps in making that task feel slightly less monotonous than it probably is, but all that's damn sure out when you put the code in, so it looks like I'll just have to find other stuff to do in this game. Well, as stated, there's the standard player versus player and player versus computer modes, as well as the computer versus computer mode, just in case you just want to watch the battles play out instead of actually participating in them. This truly is subtle yet powerful commentary on the futility of human intervention and how in the face of such great power, we are forced to merely sit back and watch, unable to stop the carnage, but merely endure it. It's really deep and complex, guys, I swear. All these different modes are, as to be expected, just 1v1 monster versus monster or mechas or whatever else battles, and while they're fine, coming back to this game, I won't lie, I think I was maybe a little too sucked into the presentation than I was the actual gameplay. I'll get to all that in a little bit, but to remain positive for a while, I have to say the attention to detail in just about every aspect of how the game is presented really is something to marvel at. This is most certainly a game made for fans, by fans. There are a lot of available characters to play as, and almost all of them are faithful recreations of monsters or mechas that have actually appeared in the movies, with even some bonus characters that only appeared in other forms of media like video games. They totally didn't need to include these guys, but they did anyway, and that's awesome. The sprites themselves really do look quite good. These are very good translations of the three-dimensional suits and, in some cases, CGI models to the world of a 2D fighting game. They really paid attention to getting the monsters' looks down just right. Same with their sound effects, which are just ripped from the movie, so not much to report on there, and even in how they play. The attacks and special abilities are all faithfully recreated. What's great is that they didn't just focus on the ranged attacks, but actually bothered to include character-specific melee attacks that tend to be some sort of reference to the character's on-screen appearance. On the topic of ranged attacks, however, those are great too. It really is just how much effort is put into getting these moves to look and sound just right that really impresses me about this game. Take Godzilla's atomic breath for instance. Several versions of the Showa form of the Big G have his breath be able to be fired in two forms. If you tap the button, he releases a cloud-like blast, while if you hold down the button, it fires a more traditional beam-like breath attack. Did they need to do that? Not at all, but damned if I'm gonna complain about it now that they did. That's a really cool thing to include that serves as a nice reference to the films, where it did often fluctuate between being more of a misty type breath and more of a beam. It's also cool, though a bit more expected, that they include many of the transformations from the films and the different forms of the characters. Monster X can transform into Kaiser Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla 2 can convert into Super Mechagodzilla, Kamata-kun can evolve into Shinagawa-kun, and so on. I just can't fault how this game approaches these characters, and how it focuses so much on getting them just right, as they should. After all, what is the appeal of a game like this if not being able to play as monsters like Godzilla, Mothra, Anguirus, and so on? This aspect was done incredibly well. The rest of the game in regards to presentation is also executed fairly well. You have a handful of unique maps and arenas to choose from, many of which are taken right from specific Godzilla movies, some of which feature destructible or interactive elements, and a few of which are tribute maps to the Godzilla NES game, which is probably the title this one takes the most amount of cues from. We've also got quite the music selection. All of the music here is synthesized renditions of classic themes from the actual movies. Sure, they don't sound as extravagant as their orchestral counterparts, but it's the thought that counts. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the browser version of this game that I played doesn't actually play any of the music. The screen is still there, and you can select songs for it to play, but when you actually get into the game, it's just silence. musically anyway. It does still have the sound effects, but it makes it even more perplexing as to why the music was muted, but not the rest of the audio. But all in all, the presentation of this game is really impressive. It seems like the people, or person, behind this game put a lot of effort into making this the best possible Godzilla fan experience they could, and for that, I give them props. But I think a little bit more effort could have been put into the gameplay. I'll try not to be too hard here and keep in mind that this is a fan-made game, likely made by one person or a couple of people just for fun and to celebrate their love of the franchise, so maybe I shouldn't set the bar too high, but at the same time, I got some issues with how this game plays. It's not having to do with any glaring problems with the controls, as you can see them displayed right here, pretty reasonable looking, right? More so, my issue lies in a deeper, fundamental programming issue with this game. I mean, just look at it. Do you detect any semblance of skill here? Any slightest hint of any strategy other than just hitting random buttons? No, there is none. All that ever happens in a player versus computer battle is either you or the AI will spam each other's special moves over and over again in a senseless exercise of just keep doing the same shit and hope the opponent dies before you do. Just reeks of thought, doesn't it? I truly feel that every victory was earned and achieved by me in this game. Actually, I can amplify this even further. Before a match, you get the opportunity to mess with the player controls, so if you want to be a little bitch and make sure you win, you totally can. If you want to absolutely torture yourself, you can do that too. But again, I profess, look at these battles. What the hell is this? This is what I mean when I say the presentation is what sucked me into this game, and not so much the actual design or gameplay. Such things might not have even really registered for me at the age I was when I first played it, but coming back years later, I really noticed. There is one more aspect of this game that I'd like to go over, and it's what made me even start playing it to begin with. So, the actual mechanics and gameplay aren't anything to write home about? No matter, because if I just go to the options menu, select player 1 versus player 2, and equip a classic matchup from one of the dozens of films in this franchise, and bam! Instant Godzilla movie sim. When you have control over both characters, you can totally dictate what they do and how they behave. There's no danger of any shitty, faulty, unsophisticated AI, because there is no AI. You get to control everything about the matchup and how it turns out, just the way I like it. And come on, it's just fun to see these matchups play out as they did on the screen, have them hit all the right beats that you want them to, music included. Be nice if it would actually play, but you can't have it all. This is where the appeal of this game came from for me playing it years ago. It was being able to the best of my abilities, accurately recreate the battles that I'd become so familiar with on screen, and then being able to actually interact with those and kind of control how they went. I found that fun as a kid. Hell, I still kind of do now. But does that make it a good game by any reasonable stretch of the imagination? I guess not, but was it ever really going to be? This is a fan game after all, we have to adjust our standards accordingly, and honestly, the fact that a game like this even exists at all, I'm happy about, because it shows yet another way in which G-fans are showing their love for the franchise by putting their spin on the property and actually creating their own entertainment spun off from the IP. And now here I am trying to create something based off of that. The cycle continues, am I right? So, to play or not to play. As an objective experience, like from a gameplay and design point of view, I can't say this game is anything great, or even really adequate. The AI is so incredibly simple and the battle so devoid of anything resembling skill that I almost recommend just skipping the player versus computer stuff entirely, and either finding a friend or just doing the movie sim thing that I did. If you are interested in doing that though, I say check this game out if you haven't already. Despite any possible complaints I have, I still have immense respect for the fans who go above and beyond in trying to give us something we haven't seen before in regards to the franchise we all love so much. And this is no exception. It might not be the best game in the world, but when the hell has that ever stopped this franchise before? Thanks for watching everybody, and see ya. Alright, before I go, I just wanted to show off something that I did when I was playing this game in free play and trying to get footage for the game. Like when Like when I can make Angerus to Gigan on the World Children's Land stage. Look at this. Look at that. Oh, what's he doing? Oh, what is he doing? Oh, it's like that scene in the movie where he gets his like face grinded on the buzzsaw, but it's like he's doing something else behind there, isn't he? Oh God, wait. I want to see. Do I do it again? Do you do it again? I don't think I do. Okay, I did it once. Yeah. If I did it once, whatever. That was really immature, but I don't even care.